You don't need to be a creator, you need to be relevant. There's a piece of advice I keep hearing everywhere. Stop being a consumer, be a creator. And it sounds great. It sounds motivational. It sounds like the kind of thing somebody successful would say on a podcast. But I think there's a problem with it. It assumes that everybody has something other people want to consume. And that simply isn't true. You might have something valuable to say. You might have an interesting life. You might have spent 30 years learning something. You might even be incredibly passionate about a particular subject, but that doesn't automatically mean somebody wants to watch you talk about it. And I think we need to be much more honest about that because if your goal is to simply express yourself, that's great. That's fine. Create whatever you want. But if your goal is to build an audience, grow a YouTube channel, or make money from content, the game is completely different. Let's talk about the creator myth. We're constantly told just create, put yourself out there, be authentic, share your story, document your journey, create value. And then people are surprised when nobody watches. They think, what's wrong with the algorithm? Why isn't YouTube recommending my videos? Why don't people appreciate my content? Maybe the answer is much simpler. Nobody was looking for it. That's not an insult. It's not a reflection of your intelligence. It's not a reflection of your worth. It's simply a reflection of demand. Think about it. If I spend 6 hours making a video called My Thoughts About Something I Find Interesting, and somebody else makes a video called How to Fix the Problem You're Having Right Now, which one do you think has a better chance of attracting an audience? The second one, because there's already a person on the other end of that video who has a problem. They're searching, they're looking, they're interested, they have intent. You don't feed the algorithm, you feed the demand. And here's where I think the traditional advice gets things backwards. People say you need to feed the algorithm. I don't think that's quite right. You need to feed the algorithm evidence of what people want. The algorithm is ultimately trying to connect people with videos they're likely to watch. So instead of starting with, what do I want to make? Start with, what are people already trying to find? That's a completely different mindset. Imagine you're opening a restaurant. Would you build a restaurant around whatever food you personally felt like cooking? Maybe, maybe not. But if you're trying to make money, you're probably going to want to know, what do people in this area eat? What are they willing to pay for it? What's missing? What do they complain about? What do they search for? YouTube's no different. The audience is the marketplace. Your video is the product, and the search bar is one of those places where the customer tells you what they want. Let me remind you, your passion isn't the product. This is probably the uncomfortable part. We're told follow your passion, but your passion isn't necessarily a business. You may love restoring old cars like I do. Great. But what specifically does someone want to know? How do I restore a classic car? Perhaps. How do I remove rust without destroying the original paint? That's better. What is the cheapest way to repair rust on a classic car? Now I've got something even more specific. Notice what happened. We went from I like classic cars to there is a specific problem someone is actively trying to solve. That's the shift. You don't necessarily need to become more interesting. You need to become more relevant. And yes, you may have nothing people want to see. Here's the part nobody wants to say. You might start a YouTube channel and discover that you don't actually have anything people want to watch. And that's okay. Seriously. It doesn't mean you're boring. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean you should give up. It means you haven't found the intersection between what you know and what people want. That's a research problem. And research is something you can solve. You can look at search terms. You can study competing videos. You can read comments. You can identify recurring questions. You can find problems people repeatedly complain about. And then you create the answer. That's a much more intelligent approach than simply turning on a camera and hoping somebody cares. Consumer first, creator second. And here's the irony: being a consumer can actually make you a better creator, because when you're consuming intelligently, you're learning. You're seeing what other people click on, you're seeing what holds their attention, you're seeing what questions people ask, you're seeing what makes people angry, what confuses them, what excites them, what they don't understand, what they desperately want solved. The problem isn't consuming, the problem is mindless consumption. If you're watching 3 hours of YouTube every night and learning nothing, that's consumption. But if you're studying 10 successful videos in your niche and asking, why did this title work? Why did people click? Why did people stay? What question did this answer? That's research. You're still consuming, but now you've got consuming as a future creator down. The real formula. So maybe the formula isn't consumer leads to creator. Maybe it's consumer leads to researcher, leads to problem solver, leads to creator. That's a much better model. Find the demand, understand the problem, create the solution, then package it in a way that people understand immediately. And that's where YouTube becomes interesting, because you're no longer saying, hey, look at me. You're saying, I know what you're looking for. That's a fundamentally different relationship with an audience. So, the next time somebody tells you you need to stop consuming and start creating, I challenge that and ask them, creating what? For whom? To solve what problem? And is anybody actually looking for it? Because you don't need to manufacture an audience out of thin air. The audience already exists. People are already searching. They're already asking questions. They're already trying to solve problems. They're already watching videos. Your job isn't necessarily convince them to care about what you care about. Your job is to discover what they already care about and then give them something worth watching. Because if your objective is attention, influence, or money, being a creator isn't the goal. Being relevant is. And maybe the smartest creators aren't the people who have the most to say. Maybe they're the people who are the best at figuring out, what does somebody else want to know? All right, that's just my perspective. Love to know yours. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.